Welcome. And tonight we have another special guest with us right here live from Alachua, Florida. And this is Vaikuntha Das.
Hare Krishna.
And Vaikuntha Das is my neighbor. We have the same property, and that's we heard about last week, the Bhakti Marg ashram. Well, that's our property. And I invited him to participate with us tonight in our new topic, which is, who knows what it is? Can any of you remember what we are talking about? If you can't remember, you're all fired. We are talking about what? Bhakti and Carol, Radha Radha, what are we talking about? What did we talk about last week? Vaishnava Relationships. Yes, Mitra. Let's give Mitra a big hand. Okay, we're talking about Vaishnava Relationships. And last week we were just skimming the surface of one of the obstacles that many of us face, which is being able to see another person's point of view. Because often when we view the world in terms of what we believe to be right, based on our own values or our own subjective understanding of what we're told, what we read. So we create a subjective view of reality, right? So then we get a very clear idea of what we believe is right. And if anyone doesn't agree with that, that makes them wrong. And when they're wrong, sometimes we want to let them know they're wrong, or we just become upset that they're wrong. Isn't it interesting that, have you ever thought of like something you really believed was true 20 years ago, and now you think the total opposite way? Any of you think that way out there in Krishna.comville? You think of something like 20 years ago, you're totally convinced this is it, and now 20 years later, you're like, oh, I was wrong. But 20 years ago, you were ready to fight for it. Right? Any of you out there ever had that experience? I'm sure you have. So sometimes friends become enemies, and enemies become friends. And people change their points of view. So we talked a little bit about that last week, about the problem when how there's the need to be understanding. What is it said? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So there's a need in relationships to understand others' points of view, and how difficult that can be when we disagree, especially when we strongly disagree, and we have a tendency to react against a person that we don't agree with. So how do we deal with that? So we were talking about being able to listen, even if you don't disagree, without becoming emotionally involved. That requires some level of detachment. And usually when we speak of detachment, we tend to speak of it in terms of grosser things, right? Such as things which are more obvious, like money, or possessions, or pride. But this is a little more subtle, just to become a little detached from always needing to be right, or detached enough that we can at least understand and sympathize to some degree with someone we don't agree with. That's a very key element in any kind of relationship. So, thank you all for being here, and we're going to take that a little bit further to the next level. And I brought some things we could read from Srila Prabhupada and discuss. Prabhupada says, you should show an example. And this was in relation to, let's say, how we should act, or we should treat somebody, especially if they're not treating us well. How do we respond? So Prabhupada's saying, you should show an example. If other God brother is not treating you well, you treat him well. So there's this, there's always this sense of well, if I'm mistreated, I deserve to mistreat them. I have justification, right? Because after all, I was mistreated, so I can get back. I'm justified. And in the same way, I'm justified in being angry because I don't agree with what you said, or what you said is not what, according to me, what Srila Prabhupada says or what the scripture says. So now I'm justified in becoming upset with you or disrespecting you in some way. So the same thing is there. You should show example of if another God brother is not treating you well, you treat him well. Then it will be right. Then it'll be right. In other words, it's like, okay, I can do the wrong thing now because you did the wrong thing. No, the Prabhupada's saying, no, you do the right thing. You always do the right thing no matter that another person does the wrong thing. Then it'll be right, obviously, right? Two wrongs don't make a right. Why you should deviate, that this God brother is not treating me well, so I shall also do. He's angry at me, or he's upset with me, or whatever, so I'm justified in returning that. No. Apani achari prabhu jivera. Who knows what that means? Anybody know? Apani achari prabhu jivera. You know? Achari. What does achari mean? Achari means to act. So one should act or teach by their example. Right? This God brother's not treating me well, so I shall also do. No. Apani achari prabhuji, you treat well. You show the example how to treat his God brother. So, it's a bit of a test, right? Now, there was, I may have told you, Booker T. Washington, who was raised as a slave. You know about Booker? Dr. Booker? He was raised as a slave, and he gradually ended up as being advisors of several presidents. You know, one of the things that Bhakta Booker said, Booker T, of course he didn't know he was a Bhakta yet, but he said, I will never allow any man to belittle me so much as to make me hate him. I will never allow any man to belittle my soul by making me hate him. So he was saying, you know, that he's being treated as a slave. And so how would you think he'd want to retaliate? You know. But he said, I'll not allow myself to hate this man, because then I come to his level. So Prabhupada's saying the same thing. That as a devotee, you always act in a particular way. And if somebody's not acting that way, does that mean you're now justified? No. To act in a non-Vaishnava way? No, you always act. So, there's a question. No, Bruce makes a comment. I found recently that if I dislike or hate someone, if one is kind to him, you will cease hating. Yeah, and I think Abraham Lincoln said, if you don't like somebody, it just means you need to get to know him a little better. So, being kind, yeah, practicing. Yeah, I mean, you know, the devotee is always meant to be kind. Just like we told that story of the sadhu, he's picking up the scorpion. Do you remember that story, anybody? The scorpions in the water, you know that story? The sadhus, two sadhus together, and one sadhu is picking up the scorpion to get the scorpion out of the water because the scorpion's drowning.
Wow.
And the scorpion, every time he picks him up, what does the scorpion do? He bites him, and he drops him. And then he picks him up again, and he bites him. So the other sadhu's looking at this and thinking, why do you, not thinking, but he's asking, why do you keep picking up the scorpion? Because every time you pick him up, to save him from drowning in the water, he bites you. And then you have to drop him. And then the sadhu said, well, it's a scorpion's nature to bite, and that's why he's biting me. I mean, it's my nature to be merciful. So if he's not giving up his nature, to bite, why should I give up my nature to be merciful? So No good deed.
Self-preservation, maybe.
And then Thomas says, no good deed goes unpunished. But, Thomas, if you give mercy, you will get mercy back. That is also there. Yes, Bhakti and Carol remember the story, yeah. So that's really, in India, when you go see a sadhu, everyone goes to the sadhu and says, Sadhu, please give me your what? Your what? If you watch Hindi movies, the sadhus go like this. What does this mean? Anybody know? And Radharani also. She's always holding her hand. That means blessings. Mercy, blessings, yes. So, they go to the sadhu and they ask for blessings because they know the sadhu is like, he's meant to give blessings. A sadhu is not meant to give curses, although sometimes you'll find stories where these sages get very angry and they curse. But you don't really find that amongst devotees, and if devotee ever gives a curse, it's only a blessing in disguise. So that's the nature. So we're all trying to be sadhus, so our nature is what? To return anger and unkindness with what? Kindness, understanding, sympathy. That's the challenge, and that's what Prabhupada's saying. So, what do you have to say about that?
I remember reading once in one of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's books, which probably louder. It's kind of, I remember it anyway. He was saying that, when we're in a confrontational situation of any sort, we should first look and see that I've somehow contributed to this negativity of this situation. Try to find our fault in it rather than everyone else's. Mm-hmm. And by going into it with that frame of mind, then also it's kind of will disarm the other people, perhaps, to a greater degree, where the situation could be resolved more positively rather than increasing the confrontation of it, Mm-hmm. And also for ourselves to really try to come to a higher, outlook on the situation in general.
Yeah, there's a saying that says wherever you had an argument or a disagreement or a bad relationship, wherever you had one, you were there. In case you didn't notice, you happened to be there. So even sometimes it may not be your fault, but in some way you could say you might have contributed by not making the situation better or pacifying it.
Right. And generally, after the fact, when we look back after we've calmed down or whatever, if we get to that stage of anger or frustration or whatever, then generally we see the situation a little differently, right? And if we'd seen it that way at the time, we wouldn't have contributed negatively to it. So sometimes just being able to put on the brakes and just step back a little bit from from those feelings is helpful.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we teach in forgiveness, in our forgiveness seminar, is that one of the definitions of forgiveness is to take responsibility for how you feel. So, in other words, you may feel offended, but you don't have to remain offended. It's, okay, somebody hurt you, you're angry, but now you take responsibility. Okay, anger is your initial reaction, but then you're going to allow that anger to remain, or you're going to take responsibility for how you feel. You can feel many different ways. You could feel that this was mercy. You could feel that you deserved it. You could feel that it's only your reaction to the situation that's causing you to feel angry. You could feel it was your karma. There's so many ways you could process it. So we often don't take responsibility. We just think, well, this person's bad. I'm being victimized by them. But there are other ways to look at it. Like you're saying, did I have some responsibility in it? Or is there another way to react to it? It's a funny thing in relationships. They say that there are 3 different ways that people like to be shown affection. And one is by being told, I really like you, or I really love you. Another one is being shown by doing something, like, well, if you love me, you'd help me wash the dishes, or you I'm struggling, so you'd help. You give me a loan or something. And another one is through physical affection. That well, if you really love me, you would hug me, or you would do something that way. So sometimes in relationships, a person is upset because they don't think the partner is showing affection, but the partner is just showing affection in one way,
Right.
like by doing it, but they want to be told,
Right.
but the person's not telling them. So that's an example of a reaction where we can be upset because we were expecting to be shown verbally affection, and we were only shown it in what the person did. So it's we think, well, I'm justified in being upset because they didn't tell me that they're affectionate. But that's not about them, it's about you. So a lot of times the anger is not about them, it's about what we wanted them to do that they didn't do. And
like in relationships, that it often seems that that's why listening is so important. I mean, in my own family life, I've had experiences where I thought I was showing affection, in very positive ways, but because I hadn't really listened to the person I was
right.
trying to show affection to, and I wasn't showing it in ways that were meaningful to them, so that you have this situation where the one person is feeling, I'm showing this affection, I'm not appreciated. The other person is feeling like, you're not hearing me, you're doing the same things over and over, so communication is so important, listening, and trying to understand what is important to the other person in a relationship.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now we have. Let's see. Dr. Carol says, I can't remember this accurately, but isn't there the idea of being peaceful in actual life, but roaring like a lion when needed? Thomas says, I read Prabhupada said that devotees should be like lions outside the temple. But Prabhupada was, he was saying that in relation to preaching, particularly in relation to women going out to distribute books. Because one of the women asked Prabhupada to say, well, isn't it that women should be, I don't forget the actual question, it's just, or all devotees should be humble. And, generally in, when you're going out, particularly to sell books, you have to be quite bold and aggressive. So I think she was saying, how can we be aggressive? Because we're being taught to be humble, or as women to be submissive, to be chaste. So that's when Prabhupada gave the answer. He said, be like a lion on the chase and a lamb at home. And then he said that being a lion on the chase is actually humility, because we're approaching people and begging them and pleading with them to take Krishna. So that's actually our humility, that we'd go and do that, put ourselves in that position, even if we have to act like a lion sometimes. Okay, so I want to bring up another point here. So let's talk a little bit about the point Vaikuntha's making. It's a very good point. That how will you know what someone wants unless you listen? And one of the things that many people find is that we're so caught up in our own life, in our own needs, in our own desires, in our own anxieties, in our own struggles to be happy. So many of us are caught up in our own struggle just to manage anxiety and stress. We're always worried about this or that. And it's said that if you're caught up with your own pain, then you become numb to the pain of others. And it's difficult to care about others and what they're feeling. And you can also say that if you are so, centered in your cause and your purpose, then it'll be difficult to care about what others want and what others are trying to achieve. Everything will be about you and what you want to achieve, or what you want, or the anxieties you're trying to eliminate, or the problems you're trying to eliminate in your life. And your pain is so great, or your sense of your need is so great that you can't sympathize with others, which can be one of the reasons we don't hear even though we're told. Because that's a very common thing. You'll say, I didn't know, and the other person will say, I've told you 100 times. And you're thinking, well, I didn't think you told me 100 times. I never heard that. And I said, well, you didn't hear it, but I told you. Anyone out there have that experience? Someone has told you something, you didn't hear it? So, if you're a man and you're married, then the answer is yes, and if you don't admit it, the answer is double yes. So, okay. Thomas says, yes, I've heard it. And then often the wife will tell the husband, you don't listen. I tell you this and you don't pay attention. You don't hear. And then a lot of times the relationship goes sour, or even the wife has had it with the husband. And when it comes to that crisis, the husband will say, why didn't you tell me? She said, I've been telling you for the last 10 years. And the husband is like in a state of shock because he didn't hear it. Because we can get so caught up in our subjective view of what's right and wrong that we can psychologically downplay others' opinions to the point of not hearing them because we don't value them. Now, how could you not hear something that someone's telling you just because you think, that's stupid, that doesn't make sense, I don't have to hear this. She doesn't know what she's talking about, he doesn't know what he's talking about. What is it? Women need to, yeah. So women, and you say things to men, ask them to repeat back what you just said and ask them to explain what you just said to make sure they heard.
I think it's also... I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, like where Vaishnava etiquette sometimes comes in, because in intimate relationships, the principle of familiarity breeds contempt is always there, not, so much consciously, but it just kind of creeps in over time, and we take people for granted. I remember many years ago, I was at a class Mahatma Prabhu gave, and he was making a really nice point that when you're dealing with devotees, there's Vaishnava etiquette, and generally we try to deal very respectfully. We try to hear them, we try to appreciate them, we try to hear what they have to say, and then sometimes we don't see the devotees that we're living with constantly, our husbands or wives or children or intimate associates. We start seeing them, in another way, just not with the same natural respect and appreciation that we do towards Vaishnavas in general. So that one area I think where Vaishnava etiquette is really important, because if we always try to respect and see someone not just as our husband or wife or someone that we're overly familiar with, but actually as the Prabhu that they are, then sometimes that can help with these kind of difficulties.
Yes, I told a story once. It was a few weeks ago. That one devotee asked Prabhupada, because he had been reading about how women should be submissive to their husbands. So the devotee said to Prabhupada, does that mean my wife should do whatever I say? And Prabhupada said, and you should be so arrogant? So isn't it interesting that, Prabhupada saying the wife should be submissive to the husband, but what he's meaning is that that's an instruction for the wife, that's for her. It's not for the husband to think, okay, that means now whatever I'm God and whatever I say she has to do. But naturally she'll want to do that if he acts properly, if he's a great devotee, if he's sensitive, if he's kind, if he's a servant, if he's helpful. Then naturally the wife would want to. But, how do many men take it? Oh, this means whatever I say, the wife has to follow, no matter how I act. So, it's just interesting how we can take something according to where our consciousness is. And like you're saying, perhaps taking it that way out of disrespect. I mean, and the Shastras say women should never be disrespected. Manu Samhita says that. The elderly, the children, the cows, the mother, women, the guru. These always respect is given to these people, the Brahmins. So that's also part of the etiquette. And as we're seeing that, or as you're saying, when we're familiar, then I think, no, I somehow I have a right because you're part of the family. Where it should actually be the opposite. Because you're part of the family, I should be more careful.
It seems too that because we live in this modern society, at least a lot of us, when you live in the ashram, it's very nice because it can be a very sort of Krishna conscious fostering environment, but many of us who live in the world of working and making a living and all those things, and there's so many external pressures, like when you read about the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and his associates, or Ramanujacharya and associates, you see these Vaishnava cultures where everybody seems to be primarily focused on their spirituality, and their loving dealings are all manifested within the scope of practicing and sharing Krishna consciousness in different ways, and they're really tasting so much nectar, and I think a lot of us, we live in this very materialistic society, that everything is based on money, and money creates so much, falsity and so much anxiety and so much pressure, and so much the object becomes, things become the object, more than people, more than relationships.
Yeah.
And we know that's not our culture, but, the mode of passion is there. We're struggling. We become influenced in ways where we then sort of, so to speak, take it out on those around us. We don't really have the clear consciousness all the time that we would like to have. Like if you go and spend a few days in a temple or go on a devotional retreat or something, what your consciousness is like versus maybe when you're really in the thick of, some very strenuous business or occupational stuff, and then, sometimes our consciousness goes through phases.
Yeah. Well, and added to that, the culture, the general, just surrounding culture that we have to interact with. There's a unfortunate reality that often happens to people is where they begin to love things and use people instead of love people and use things. It's like, I have to have these things. I love these things. And then people become objects of utilization to help me get things. And we saw in Prabhupada that everything was people based. That was all about people. So we have some comments here. Lavananda says, you can hear something and not understand or see what is being said until one's mind can understand it. It's so Carol saying, I heard recently on a program about brains and the difference between men and women. So then it would, so Lavananda is saying, then you may hear something the woman says, but the male processes it differently and may misunderstand. And therefore, as we said last week, the woman should ask, what's your understanding of this? And it's just, do you understand what I said? Can you repeat it back? How do you understand it? I'm going to read something that relates to this. Research has shown that marriages don't stay together primarily because people are compatible. They stay together primarily because people know how to deal with their differences. So we can say one thing, as soon as you get married, there's differences, just because one's a man, one's a woman. But these differences can exist everywhere in the world because we're all different. And you may be interrelating with people who are much, much different than you, who just don't think and see things the way you do. And so we can think that the basis for getting along is compatibility. But research is showing it's not compatibility, but it's managing the differences. Okay, we see that we're different. We may look at things differently. We may feel differently. We may process life in different ways. So how do we deal with that to create compatibility? And that's what we talked about last week. We're talking about this idea of unity and diversity, not university and diversity, unity and diversity. And the idea that if two people disagree, there may be a third opinion that's greater than the two that they're arguing for. The synergist, the 1 + 1 = 11, instead of the 1 + 1 = 1, or the compromise 1 + 1 = 1 or a half. So that's a really important principle to meditate on, the management of differences. Because even there are so many levels of compatibility, there has to be differences. And even differences in how we were 10, 20 years ago. We're also different. Everything's in flux. So it's important because everyone's going to change and grow, and then there has to be some degree of respect for other people's views. Now, what else do we have? We're talking about women need to repeat things to men, yes. And we may understand things differently. Love and understand. Thomas, I haven't... Thomas is joking here. Earphone in one ear and his wife in his other. Okay. Thomas is saying, Vaishnava etiquette is difficult for me. Etiquette is the jewel of Vaishnava behavior. So, acting according to etiquette it's like Lord Chaitanya praised, I think it was Sanatana Goswami, because he acted according to etiquette. So the whole idea of etiquette is, well, I may not actually want to act that way, but this is the etiquette, so I do it. I mean, etiquette is there to protect you from yourself. That's the whole. Oh, Gora finally made it. Gora, where are you? Gora's out in, he's in the far ends of Canada right now, on some island. What island? He's in Newfoundland or something. Okay, so we have to hear from Gora. Gora's my godbrother, and he promised he would come, and he finally made it. Wow, okay. Years ago, Rupanuga Prabhu told me that before getting married, it's important for the male to consider his earning power, because there will be enough stress in marriage without the added stress of having enough Lakshmi. Yeah, that's a big problem. Bhakti and Carol says, when the power of love overcomes the love of power. Yes. But Thomas says he's still serious. Okay, Gora. Whatever that initially attracted a couple to one another may eventually become something that annoys each of them, yes. In other words, when you were courting, you saw the differences in your partner as something interesting, intriguing, or attractive. Also, the fact that you were more patient and forgiving in those days caused you to overlook whatever faults those traits may contain. The question is, how do you handle these different traits, you and your partner, that now drives you up the wall? Yeah, so that's the same point. Yes, Gore's in Newfoundland, about to get on the boat to come back. So that's the same thing again. They stay together primarily because they know how to deal with the differences. Okay, the differences are there. How do we manage them? We talked about that last week. That sometimes when we see differences, then we think, well, these are differences, so we must part ways because we're different. Instead of thinking, okay, how can we work with these differences? So Brenda Lee says, I'm glad I'm a widow, 50 years old. No more worrying about relationship, but you're going to have relationships with other people unless you live in a cave. Relationships with other women, employers, employees. This one devotee wrote me, said, you have relationships with your toenails. He said, you have relationships with everything. But we know what you mean, the relationship with the guy. But sometimes also Krishna creates these relationships which are difficult to deal with, to help us understand the real relationship is with him. That's if we depend on another person to make us happy, then we've misunderstood Krishna consciousness.
And sometimes embracing the differences can help us to grow, because we always have room to do so. And a lot of times it almost seems like people are put together where the differences can be complementary. Even if we don't realize it right away, sometimes if we embrace those differences, we actually find that it makes us more complete and more able to do what we need to do.
I mean, it's definitely an opportunity to grow. I was also mentioning last week, I find a lot of times I like to listen to people I disagree with, just because it enables me to see a perspective that I'm close to.
Right.
And I find that helpful. And sometimes I'll actually agree with much of what they say, although initially I didn't, because I'm able to understand where they're coming from. And that involves the whole idea of being able to get into another person's point of view. That because we're so caught up in our own point of view and how difficult it is to see from their point of view, and how important that is. So, Lovinanda saying, yeah. Go ahead. No, Lovinanda's just agreeing with me that everybody's getting on Brenda Lee's case. Please forgive us. No, relationships are everywhere, but we understand what you mean. You've lived with those relationships, and they can be trying and testing, and some of us are better with relationships than others. Some of us are like recluses. We like to be alone, and that's not good for relationships. Like to be alone like 15 hours a day, and we may not be so communicative, and so that makes it more difficult. Some are better at relationships than others, and some are, their karma is not to have very good relationships. Others have karma that just makes it difficult. It's kind of like, it's interesting, if I often think about this, that a lot of times people are deficient in something. So now we're talking about relationships, so they may be deficient in relationships, and even they can read books about it and go to seminars, but still they find it difficult. Just as people go to seminars on how to get wealthy, and they don't. I mean, some do and some don't. So, we all have our nature that we're dealing with, and for some of us it's more of a challenge. And others kind of naturally have built-in skills. They're just better at it. So, Gora says, we can look at the annoying differences as opportunities to practice patience. Exactly. And see things from another point of view, and in so doing, learn. Yes. I took the words right out of his mouth. Exactly what I said. Bhakti and Carol's agreeing, differences help us grow. And Brenda Lee's saying, yeah, I have more time to read. Yeah, that's true. As we get older and more renounced, then it gives us more time for Krishna consciousness. You can look at your partner's idiosyncrasies as traits that make him or her unique, and adjust yourself to suit him as far as possible. Yeah. I mean, another thing is that is really saving grace in looking at relationships. It's just understanding that each of us is built a certain way based on our DNA, our past karma, our personality, and the conditioning of past and present lives. So I know for myself, a lot of times if I'm in a relationship or working with somebody and they may ask me to be a certain way because the way I am is not working for them, and I understand and I agree how difficult it is to always be that way because it's not the way I naturally am. Even though I know that if I act a certain way, it's detrimental to the relationship. So in understanding that, I take that same understanding and look at others that may not be acting in a way that I would appreciate or would like them to, and understand, well, they're also who they are, and their act and the way they act is subconscious. They don't even know it. It's just they're acting as who they are, but the way they're acting may not be working for me, and how difficult it is to change, even if I tell them, you should, if you do it this way, it'll be better for me. But just so understanding how difficult it is for myself to change, also therefore accepting how difficult it is for another person to change, and that's just the way they are. And you know how predictable some people are. It's like you're in a situation with someone, and a lot of times you just know how they're going to act because that's the way they are, and it's almost like they're incapable of acting any other way. And we can accept that because that's who they are. That's how they respond. We know. And if we know that and accept that, then we don't have any expectations for anything else. And then we can deal with that. I mean, we may want them to be another way, but that's the way they are. So at least we can appreciate the good things about them, and the things we don't like we can accept. Well, that's who that person is due to all their conditioning, and if they ever feel a need to change, then, or see a need to change, then they will. And if they don't, they won't. And what else can we do but do the right thing ourselves?
It seems too that being willing to work on relationships helps us to develop humility, because, the society we live in, the material society, it seems the tendency is getting more and more impersonal. And as that becomes more and more a trend, it's much easier to kind of get into the consciousness of just me and mine and my way. And I remember some years ago living in San Diego, driving up to LAX, and there was a big sign right at the kind of the beginning of the internet era when the internet stuff was getting big, and there was a giant billboard by LA Airport that said, "Need a loan? Hate people? Loans.com." And and around the time when I was also noticing a lot of people I had talked to, even on some of our Hare Krishna websites, some people were starting to notice that there was a trend toward people writing in, speaking very, very strongly on issues, sometimes even to almost on the border of being offensive towards the people they were communicating with. At least some people felt that way, and kind of felt that if they were facing a person face to face, that actually their exchange would be much more polite and considerate of the other persons. But because of the impersonal layer of just sitting at a keyboard and firing off words, sometimes we become very, very sure of ourselves and fixed in certain ways. Whereas if we kind of force ourselves to try and relate with people and deal with people, and like some of the ways Mahatma Prabhu was saying, try to be accepting for people of who they are, that also helps us to develop humility, because maybe we're not always right, and maybe we can learn a lot from other people in other situations in many ways. So.
Yeah, speak sweetly. You may have to eat your words. Okay, let's see. Okay. Lavananda says, I think marriage relationships are easier than outreach into communities that find Vaishnava Hare Krishna lifestyle in excess or dogmatic. When you're in a community, then you're thrown in with all kinds of people with different cultures and different conditioning, and generally in a marriage relationship, you've chosen that relationship, or generally with friends and so forth, you choose them. But when you're in a community, then you may not always be able to choose who you're dealing with and who you're working with. So it is. And Prabhupada himself said, even if you don't get along with the devotees, don't leave. So he even acknowledged that difficulty. That we create temples to give association, but then we may not get along with everybody, because many of the people are not the kind of people we would ever choose as our friends. So it is a challenge, it's true. So Bhakti Carol says, I read something that struck with me. Sometimes more difficult situations, relationships, even temples help one to grow more, while easy coasting in situations, relationships, even temples can allow one to become lazy. Any difficulty is an opportunity to become stronger or weaker, depending how you approach it. A lot of times when people have bad relationships and they work on them, then they come out with extremely good relationships. So it's a lot of times it's said it's not about the people, it's about the relationship. It's you're the husband, I'm the wife, you're the boss, I'm the, and if put any two people in, the boss, employee, the husband, there's going to be difficulty because of the nature of the relationship. It requires certain dynamics. So you also find that some people who have had very difficult childhoods become very successful in their adult life because of having to deal with overcoming the handicaps they had in the earlier part of their life. There's that story about these two brothers, and their father was an alcoholic, and a criminal. So during their whole life growing up, their father was in and out of jail, and he was always drunk, beating up their mother and like that. So one of the sons, he ended up just like his father. And one of the sons ended up the opposite of his father. He was very successful. He never drank alcohol, he never was in jail. And the other one was an alcoholic. The other brother was an alcoholic and always in jail. And so both of the brothers were interviewed. And they said, how is it that you ended up where you ended up today? And they both gave the same answer. They said, well, of course, because of my father. Well, my father was always in jail, so of course I always ended up in jail. My father was always in jail, so I definitely didn't want to be in jail, so I ended up the opposite. So, in that way, difficult situations can be the source of strength. Of course, if you're in this victim mode, then you'll just say, well, I'm this way because that's the way my father was. What else can I do? Yeah. So, well, spiritual sky's with us. Okay. Relationships can be in different modes, definitely. Definitely can be in different modes. The mode of ignorance would be the helpless relationship. We can't do anything. We're just, this is how it is. Mode of passion would be a lot of fighting. The mode of goodness would be a lot of communication, understanding, patience, tolerance, right? Spiritual Sky says, I am that way, I like being alone, individualism is a rare thing. The herd mentality and hive mind is what is taught today. But we need association, so what are we going to do? We need sadhusanga. So both things are there. Yes, the herd mentality. They say if you follow the crowd, you'll be going the wrong place. So obviously as devotees we need some individuality to not follow the herd, but if the herd's going back to Godhead, we'll follow them. And then Gaur says, people naturally have built-in skills because they have worked on them in previous lives. Those skills didn't come without getting out of our comfort zone. Yeah. So, and we can always increase those skills. And so when we're in strained relationships, then we're forced to get out of our comfort zone. And we can do it. Most of us can do it if we are committed to it. I mean, I think the whole thing, in terms of relationships, what I've found, and having so many bad relationships, what I've found is the commitment to a good relationship is really, the key. If you're not committed, then how can? I mean, both parties have to be committed to making it better and having some ideal of what they would like it to be like. And, not giving in, just saying, well, this is a bad relationship. But let's have an ideal, and let's shoot for that ideal. Let's have a very high ideal of how we want it to be. And then question one another, question ourselves, how would I have to be to make it better? What would I have to do? At least ask ourselves that question. So, Bruce is saying, everything material is in the modes. So relationships, everything we do is in the modes. So we could say relationships in the mode of goodness. What would be the quality of those relationships? I mean, mode of goodness means there's happiness. So there'd be very good relationships. And Brenda Lee saying, I cherish my individualism. I find it hard to give up. Yes? We all have to think for ourselves. We all have to do what we understand to be the right thing. And at the same time, we have to work within a greater community and be an individual within a greater community and interact with others. We're always interacting. So both are great skills to learn. So Thomas says, how about a specific example of difficulty with another devotee? When I first tried living in the temple, the devotee who shared the room with me pulled a huge butcher's knife out from under his pillow and showed it to me and said, I keep this under my pillow.
Hey Krishna.
And he scared the you-know-what out of me. What to do about that? happened at the Radha Govinda Mandir in Brooklyn. What to do about that? Run out of that room as fast as you can. And go tell the temple president you've got a madman in the room with you. Yes, Bruce says, this is a quote from Prabhupada. He said, wherever there are two men together, there will be a fight. I think Prabhupada said, whether there are two men together or two women, there will be a disagreement. Two people together, there will be a disagreement. Yeah. Gora, Prabhupada said, enjoyment means two. I think I delude myself when I think I can enjoy alone. We need others to enhance our enjoyment in life. But Prabhupada told Satsvarup Maharaj in a letter that the tendency to want to be alone is due to the reactions from the past. So, like, I'm also a loner. Gora's a loner. But so, we need both. There's a saying that if you're an introvert, it's not good just to be alone and inside doing quiet work. It's good to go out with people. And if you're extrovert, it's good to be doing quiet things, to do what's opposite of your nature. Because that balances you. So Bhakta Patrick is with us. So Bruce says sometimes to be alone can be a help, yes. Especially if you're an extrovert, and being alone is good, as they were saying. And so both things, there's balance, of course. I think the point that Gaura's making and I'm making is that, sadhu sangha is a primary need, because we become inspired by other devotees' association. We may not be able to live with devotees, that may be difficult, but still that sangha is important, and then we should try to seek sangha that inspires us. Seek sangha that is compatible with our values. What time is it, Uddhava?
54.
Oh, okay. I don't see the clock on this computer. Okay. Yeah, so being alone, we need our own time. Both things are there. Prabhupada said, Gaura says, Prabhupada says there's one principle higher than chanting, that is association, because without it your chanting will simply dry up. I have realization. Yeah. So association is important. The thing is that sometimes when we get association we can be critical, and then it has a negative effect. And then at that point, if we become too critical, Krishna may take association away from us. So, Gaura says, Prabhupada said the temple is no place for lazies or crazy. So if someone showed his knife, it sounds like a crazy passed under the radar.
Yep.
Chaitanya asked what the most auspicious activity is. Ramananda Roy replied, association of devotees. The only auspicious. Yeah. Or the most valuable thing. So, my saying is, I love all devotees even if I hate them. I think that's the really bottom line. We have to love them even if we hate them. Even if we dislike some devotees, we have to love them. Even if we don't get along, we have to love them.
I think cooperation also doesn't mean giving up individuality. Individuality is great, and when various individuals cooperate, then everything can become improved and enhanced wonderfully. So I don't think the idea of having better relationships means giving up individuality, but it just means as we respect our own individuality, also respecting everyone else's, and being willing to work together for a common cause, which is beneficial for everybody.
Yeah. Again, managing differences, dealing with differences. That's really been the theme of the last two talks. Like, dealing with differences. I mean, it's easy just to remove ourselves from someone or something we don't like. It's the challenge is being able to deal with it. And as Vaikuntha was saying, there's Vaishnava etiquette. There's one time Prabhupada said, when a devotee disagrees with another devotee who's in a position of authority over them, that they should follow them, and still they can disagree and bring that up with somebody else. In this case, Prabhupada said you can bring it up with me, but until it's resolved, you should serve them. You should cooperate with them. So that was always a principle, take a humble position and cooperate, and then work out the differences and disagreements while you're cooperating. So that's, not easy, but that's what Prabhupada wanted.
It seemed like Srila Prabhupada so expertly managed so many very talented individuals, and through them was able to spread everything so far, so fast.
Yeah.
Not really by making everybody fit the same mold, but by inspiring everybody to do all the variegated things that they did and are doing,
And also sometimes Prabhupada was expert enough that when people didn't get along, he would just put them in different places.
Right.
Just acknowledging these people don't get along. Or even some people who couldn't get along with anybody, he'd put them in charge of everybody because they couldn't follow anybody.
What was that one story? Someone asked for sannyas, and Prabhupada asked them why, and they said, because I haven't heard I'm getting along with people, so Prabhupada gave him sannyas.
Right.
So they would...
So when all else
have their own
fails,
scene.
all else fails, give them sannyas. If you're not getting along with your husband, give him sannyas. Bhakti and Carol said, someone said when I first came to the temple, I wrote it down and kept it on a paper ever since in my kitchen. What did they say? Said this. Oh, Ramananda Roy, the only association of devotees is the only auspicious activity. When you first came to the temple, yeah. Bruce is asking, how do the modes fit in to understanding relationships? Well, we spent a lot of time talking about resentment and revenge, which is a product of ignorance. So discord, disharmony is a product of ignorance, passion. And if a relation, I am right, at all costs, that is passion. And or a relationship that's not working and you can't get it together to make it work would be ignorance. Can't even get to the point of discussing it. Can't even take action. Thoughtlessness can be passion. Acting impetuously without considering another person's feelings, point of view would be passion. Goodness is, more on the level of intelligence, really looking at things in terms of what's best for everyone involved. Being more detached. Sattva gun is detachment. That, okay, I may want it this way, but I'm detached enough to allow it to go some other way. Detachment's a big thing in just being able to deal with difficult situations in general. And for many of us, it's hard to just let go of an idea we have about having something a certain way. So that would be the sattva gun. There's some detachment. Okay, I like it this way, but it's not going to work out. I'm not going to fight about it. Like that.
Yeah, like sometimes you see people who were dealt with by leaders in a way that they felt was very nourishing for them, and they really felt cared for, and they feel that inspiration for years and years and even decades, whereas people who felt that maybe they were exploited, which is more like maybe there was some temporary goal and more motive, passion or whatever, sometimes that resentment stays for a long time too,
Yeah.
Talking to people and
people being used, they feel used. Everyone wants to feel appreciated and loved. And that's part of a relationship, that people appreciate one another. And it's very interesting because if you appreciate someone and you don't appreciate another person, both people can do the same thing. And the one person's activities won't bother you and the other ones will, even though they're doing the same thing. So, it's an interesting thing to look at. So, we have some more comments here. Let's see. What about when you are willing to cooperate and respect a devotee, one may have had problems with in the past, but they are not willing? Bruce says, be kind. And Gaur says, compromise without insisting that you understand each other. You may never fully understand why your partner is the way he or she is. You just need to accept it. I must get on the ferry boat now. I offer my obeisances to everyone. Thank you all very much. Please pray that I may join you again next Tuesday. So, as Prabhupada said, if someone's doing something wrong, you do the right thing. So you can only do what's right. If they don't want to cooperate, what can you do? You as long as you do your best to do the right thing. What more can you do than that? And the result is what it is. I mean, you can try to, you may think, well, if I really was doing the right thing, there would be a better result. That may be true. It may not be. We can't always control other people. We can be kind to other people as best we can. We can serve them. We can appreciate them. We can encourage them. But how they react to that ultimately is up to them. So.
But even if they don't reciprocate in a favorable way, just by doing that, we gain so much, within our own self.
Right. Yeah. You do the right thing, yeah.
Because carrying those feelings around, bad feelings towards another person, can be very, very burdensome in the long run, even if we feel they wronged us or we wronged them or whatever. Yeah. But if we have to carry those feelings around, whereas if we can do the right thing, and it seems like that enables us to let go of those negative feelings, and it lightens our load, if nothing else.
You can serve them. You can glorify them to others. Speak highly of them to others. All difficult things to do if a person hurts you, but if I think that the real meditation is that Prabhupada is training us to act in a certain way, or our spiritual master is training us to act in a certain way. So we go back to this point of, is there really any justification for not acting that way? There may be provocation, but is there justification? So there's always provocation. But we don't want to sink to the level of justification, because really there isn't any justification. I mean, how can you justify a sinful activity or improper behavior because of someone else's improper behavior? We'd said many times that Bhaktisiddhanta said that others' faults can't harm you unless you allow them to. So if you allow another person's bad behavior, misbehavior to affect you, then you'll be contaminated by that, and then you may react under the influence of the modes of nature. So he's saying you don't allow their misbehavior.
What was that story of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was being heckled by someone? You know that story?
Tell me a little more and I'll tell you.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was traveling, lecturing, and with many, many disciples and followers and people very eager to hear, and someone kept coming kind of heckling him. And I guess his close disciples always wanted to go throttle the guy or drag him out or whatever, and he just kept the guy. He didn't stop anybody, and then at some point he actually expressed gratitude to that person because that story that he felt
he was correcting him.
Yeah, that he took it in a positive way. I guess he was showing that example to his followers also. That he said something like it. He makes me humble, or he somehow
Krishna's sending him to keep me humble.
He took it in that way.
Yeah, it's true. That's a wonderful way to take it.
There's a story like that with Srila Prabhupada also in Montreal. I remember reading that little book, Prabhupada. I think Gopal Krishna Maharaj tells the story that it was someone he knew, and Prabhupada was speaking, and the man started really going off on Prabhupada, and Gopal Krishna was shocked, and then afterwards Prabhupada, took it like that I must have offended him in the past life or something. Just very humbly.
And there's another story on which somebody was challenging Prabhupada in a very critical way, and the devotees wanted to stop him. Prabhupada allowed the man to go, and then after the program, the devotees were discussing the offenses this man was making and what his future would be. Will he go to some hellish planet or what? Prabhupada said, why don't we just forgive him? So he wasn't taking it personally. So let's see. Okay, what do we have? Sangeeta joined us. Better late than never. So Sangeeta says, thank you so much. I guess you were here and you just joined chat. For this class, I joined ISKCON at the age of 16 in 1972. If we had classes like this, it would have saved so many devotees from leaving. You know, like Prabhupada said, if someone leaves, it's, half their fault and half our fault. Of course, in 1972, I was 22. So if we had classes like this, I might just go, this is a waste of time. This is all sentimental. I don't know if I would, but when we're young, we're passionate, and we tend to think, our world's very small when we're young. We tend to think we're right about everything. But it is true. We need to be able to. Krishna consciousness is not about tit for tat. It's about doing the right thing, and it's, as we've said many times, it's about our relationship with Krishna. So it's so nice to think when there's some conflict to think, well, how am I supposed to act as a devotee? Irregardless of the difficulty of in the relationship that I'm having here at the present moment. But what's the general way I should act in any relationship when confronted with this particular difficulty or problem? And so, and how that will affect my relationship with Krishna. So then we think it's more about my standing in bhakti, my sadhana, my developing and practicing good qualities than it is necessarily about this particular relationship. There's a higher principle that this relationship affects my relationship. How I act with this person is affecting how I act, affecting my relation with Krishna. What does Krishna say? Serve my devotee. That's real service to me. So Brenda Lee saying, I truly appreciate these classes. They help me in my spiritual growth, I believe. Thank you. Bhakti and Carol, 1972, I was hitchhiking around. Wish I could have met the devotees back then. Yes, I very much treasure these classes. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you all for listening. So we'll continue with this katha, and hopefully, within a few more weeks, we'll all become angels, and no one could ever disturb us in any situation. Wherever we go, we'll just be giving love and light and compassion, and everyone who comes in our association will just want to cooperate and be the kindest hearted person ever. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.